Hello and welcome to the Amargi Mosaic. I'm your host, Elif Sarican. Today I'm going to be speaking to Sardar Saadi, students, faculty, and staff of Rojava's university, namely the University of Rojava in Qamishlo, Kobani University, and Sharq University in Raqqa, have issued an urgent statement concerning the developments that have been taking place in Rojava, particularly the assaults and the attacks by the Syrian transitional government and Turkish proxies. So today we'll be discussing that statement, what it means, and also what these attacks mean in terms of the impacts on education and what it might mean for the future of Syria and how to envisage and how to build a vision for Syria. Sardar, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Elif.
So, Sardar, you're a socio-cultural anthropologist. You're also the executive director of Gina Academy for Humanities and Social Research. You were co-director of the Institute of Social Sciences and Humanities at the University of Rojava, where you've had a long-term engagement with alternative education projects. And right now, the universities you've worked with, as I said, are under direct attack. Students and faculty have left their classrooms to join the self-defense forces. Turkish drones are targeting areas near the University of Rojava in Qamishlo, and Kobani University is under siege with no electricity or water for the past several days. The statement from your former colleagues describes this as an unfolding both feminicide and genocide, targeting not just the people, but the very possibility of learning itself. So, as someone who's helped build these educational projects from the ground up, what does it mean when universities themselves become military targets and become under attack? And what's happening right now? Because we've also heard that, now university buildings are also being filled with displaced people seeking shelter. What are you hearing from on the ground as well?
Yeah, well, first of all, what we are witnessing in regard to universities in the region is not what usually the liberal media would say that these are collateral damages of war. These are not collateral damages. Universities in Rojava and other civil institutions, the movement there, they are being directly targeted as a political and social institutions because they embody an alternative solution for the socio-political problems, geopolitical problems in the region. They are being targeted because they embody an alternative future. So what is happening right now, as you said, all university activities are basically stopped, and the university buildings are right now being used as shelters for thousands of displaced families. So since January 6th, with the attacks on Kurdish neighborhoods in Aleppo, Sheikh Massoud, and Ashrafia, we had another massive influx of displaced peoples to the Jizra part of Rojava, about 150,000. And right now, the last number that I heard was close to 30,000 displaced families. And schools, university buildings, labs, they're all right now being used to shelter those displaced. These universities are not caught in this war. They are being targeted because they represent this alternative way of how to live together, how to coexist. And they were built in the middle of war, not after peace. This alone would tell us that what kind of institutions we are talking about, what kind of institutions they were. And I can give you more information about how they were built, the process that we came to this point that we have many students right now in different levels, in different departments, in the different disciplines that we're hoping to graduate in a month or so. Many students that I was directly involved with many graduate universities at both Kobani and Rojava University. Right now we have no contact, of course, with Kobani. We have we spoke to someone from the university who is right now in the Jizre canton, but after that, the contact was basically cut off. We don't know what is happening at the University of Al-Sharq in Raqqa, but I can tell you more about how this university was built. The information that we are receiving is basically coming from the University of Rojava, and all of our students, they are right now part of the self-defense forces because they have to. So the university was not an elitist kind of an institutions to train what we usually call the future leaders of a society or whatever. They were part of the society. They were embedded in what was happening in that region for the past 10, 12 years.
And, the statement mentions, and as we know, before the autonomous administration, particularly places like Raqqa and Kobane had no universities at all and actually had barely any, kind of further education or like learning on that level. So, can you tell us a bit about, well, firstly, how they were formed, perhaps, like in terms of, particularly Raqqa, where it was once the capital of the caliphate that the so-called Islamic State declared. So what does it mean that, a university like you've just described existed in a place like Raqqa, and how was it built?
Well, let me go back to history a little bit. Just tell you what's the story of universities in Syria in general. Syria is the first place where we had a modern Arab university that was established in 1918, just during the time that it was under French mandate. But during the civil war in Syria, we practically had four different kinds of universities, different ways that universities were built. And this history is very important because right now that we're talking about the future of Syria, like people really kind of talking in vacuum, like there is no history that the past regime tried everything to basically de-develop the region where predominantly is inhabited by Kurdish populations. So the eastern parts of Frat. The first university that was built in that region was in Deir ez-Zor, and it was only in 2004, despite the fact that the first university, the modern university in the Arab world, was in Syria. So until 2004, this region did not have a university, and it was also very limited university in Deir ez-Zor and had only two campuses, one in Raqqa that was open in 2011 and one in Hasaka. So what we are seeing is the politics of the development that not providing any infrastructures of education, infrastructures of basically improving life. This was part of the reason that this region was quite behind, and many Kurdish youth, many Arab youth from that region, they had to go to western parts of Syria if they want to study, if they want to work, if they want to be part of what is happening. As I said, during the civil war, especially the final years, like the 2020s, where we practically have four different university systems in Syria, one controlled by regime, one controlled by HTS, the people belonging to Ahmad Shara in Idlib, one controlling by Turkey, and one controlling by the Democratic Autonomous Administration of Northern East Syria. In the Rojava, or in Northeast Syria, the university story started actually in Afrin in 2015. We have the University of Afrin established, unfortunately, in 2018. It was occupied by Turkey, and this invasion war that Turkey has followed since then in Syria, northern parts of Syria. So right now, the University of Afrin, the buildings, everything is used for a branch of the University of Gaziantep, a totally settler colonialist kind of mindset and project to basically Turkify those parts of Syria. The language of education is Turkish. In jihadist areas, we know that, of course, what they were doing in their civil institutions, and everything was based on jihadi ideology. In the regime, the story was also clear how they wanted to create obedience and desired citizenship through their education system. But in Rojava, Afrin University was this very first time that we have a university based on feminist, communal, and anti-capitalist model of knowledge. In 2016, this story continued with the University of Rojava in Qamishlo, 2017 in Kobani. We have the University of Kobani that after the symbolic and historical resistance in Kobani that made Kobani the symbol of resistance in Rojava. This university was built, and it was very important work, and everyone was quite proud of this work, the University of Kobani, because it symbolized the process of rebuilding the society, rebuilding a city during the wartime. And then, as you mentioned, in 2021, the University of Al-Sharq in Raqqa was established, completely Arabic university, and it was completely built and managed by the local people. Every program in that university was in Arabic language, and I had a really good close friendship with many Arab scholars who work at the University of Al-Shar. And it's incredibly sad for me to see that jihadists are now controlling the University of Al-Shar and everything that was produced there. So the universities in Rojava, they were truly alternative when you think about Syria, because under the regime's control, university was only about producing technicians that are obedient to the state, and they can help basically to run the machinery of oppression. In jihadist areas in Idlib, that right now they want to try to basically impose it everywhere in Syria under the name of the new legitimacy of the interim transitional government, or whatever they name it. Turkish occupied parts, of course, it's a different story. So these universities in Rojava, not just for Kurdish language, but also for rebuilding the society based on principles of grassroots democracy, based on principles of women liberation, coexistence, working together, sharing futures. These were foundational principles for these universities, and they were working quite well. We have evidence of how universities were quite successful in bringing the society together. So
Mm.
the targeting of universities, they are quite intentional. They are not collateral damages of this war.
Yeah, and I mean, as you've described, and as you know, this statement that's an urgent call to the world describes, you know, the universities say that they were grounding learning in women's liberation, ecology, and democratic communal life. So it's very clear that this wasn't just about buildings or degree programs, and it wasn't just about what was taught, but also how it was taught. And you know, as someone also who has studied grassroots knowledge production, particularly in conflict zones, when you know the students, faculty, and staff of these universities talk about defending the possibility of life that they have struggled to build, what kind of educational model is under threat here? And what I mean is, you know, what might forces trying to establish a very hyper centralized control see this particular approach so that to education so dangerous.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And destroying universities is a way to break this intergenerational continuity and erase political memory that was created during these years of experimenting with democratic self-rule. People should really understand that all of those projects, all of those utopian ideas, these dreams for creating this new society was taking place during a time that all different sides from Turkey, from Assad's regime, from jihadists, from ISIS, and the other side from the Kurdish side as well. There were attacks on Rojava. They were under embargo. There was war going on, and it has only been like since the first university in Afrin, it has only been 10 years that we have this experiment. But I believe that even during those years, we have created my colleagues in those universities. They have created this political memory, and what we are seeing right now is not just jihadists coming back to rule. Getting rebranded, getting legitimacy from the world, and getting approval to kill women, people, students, professors, colleagues who are trying to build something. So I believe this is epistemicide. This is epistemicide paired with physical violence. This is scholicide. This is killing the potential for children in that region. Last year, we had about 870,000 children studying in different educational schools and institutions in the region. This is to kill their opportunity to learn and to educate themselves in a way that it's based on principles of how to be human, how to live together, how to exist, and how to exercise democratic rights and freedoms.
And I mean, what's happening now, particularly against, well, also against universities and places of learning that particularly do it in an alternative way, but also like even when, universities don't represent necessarily alternative learning, we see forces like, the HDS, the way they attack any kind of knowledge, right? Like the world saw when ISIS was kind of like running through Iraq and Syria, that some of the first, institutions or buildings or like structures they would attack would be libraries and so on. So I think that's also really, I would say, really important for people to understand. And, the universities are calling for particularly international academic solidarity, so teachings, institutional pressure, and particularly, as you've said, refusing to normalize HTS, which is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the force that the so-called Syrian transitional government's president leads,
Mhm.
al-Jawani. And so like one of the calls actually is from these universities is to the refusal to normalize HTS rule in Syria. So, as someone who bridges academic solidarity with practical educational alternatives, you have quite a lot of experience doing that. What can international academics actually do that goes beyond symbolic gestures? And if these physical universities are destroyed, how do we preserve and continue the educational revolution they represent, even when their physical spaces, perhaps, possibly would not exist anymore?
Yeah, let me go back to the statement and the very first sentence. I really want to mention this, and then I will respond to your question about international solidarity, which is incredibly important in these hours and days, especially. So, this statement explicitly names feminicide and genocide as unfolding realities, right? And I want to highlight that the universities in Rojava, are among the few institutions in the whole region where women teach in large numbers.
Mm.
There's a co-directorship everywhere and co-management. Women shape curricula. They shape, sorry about that, shape the curriculum, the educational programs that we have at this university. So genealogy as a science and the knowledge system of the Kurdish women's movement is not just limited to a department or some institutions. They are embedded in our curriculum. They shape how we connect with these issues. So women's liberation is not a topic but a foundation. And targeting universities is therefore also a gendered act of violence. What we can do also outside, and we have limited connectivity with the region, but Rojava has always insisted that international solidarity should be framed as part of self-defense, as part of the people's resistance struggle to preserve, to survive, and to continue with their work with their alternative project. And it shouldn't be as a charity. And I want to be very clear here that silence in this context is complicity, and this educational system, they need the international solidarity, international support. And we were able in the past 5 6 years to establish this sort of networks of kind of connections between these universities and educational institutions, professors, intellectuals, scholars outside in Europe, in North America, and other places. So if universities in Rojava fall, it won't be because they failed. It will be because that the world, that people who can do something failed to stand with them. And it is very important. It is very important to organize, to activate unions, to get in touch with student groups, to do teach-ins, to refuse silence, and to stand with colleagues who have worked with universities in Rojava, and maybe get in touch with the people that and give them some morals, some support, some concrete words of solidarity, that they can feel that they are not abandoned. This is very important because people in Rojava, they feel they are abandoned and they are under an immense military attack that could very much create another genocide in the region, beside what we have seen in Gaza, in other places. And these are all a really alarming situation. All of that are setting off alarms for us that we are outside of these regions of conflict zones, these places of war. We feel that we are immune, but we are not. If you won't stand up with Rojava, with the people struggle in the region, Gaza, with other places, this will come to us as well outside of the region. So I want to be very clear here that staying silent in this situation is to be part of what is happening against these people. I don't want to accuse anyone, but solidarity must be framed as part of self-defense of these people, not charity, not just signing some petitions. We need to organize on campuses and work with our unions and other organizations network and raise awareness about what's happening.
Thank you very much, Sardar. And I'm sure people will be following your work, and particularly what else the students and faculty of these universities might be saying. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for today's episode of the Amargi Mosaic. Until next time, take care.